Lily's bedroom was a sanctuary, a quiet haven filled with the hushed melodies of her deepest desires. Tacked to the pale pink wallpaper were dozens of photographs, cut carefully from fan magazines and newspapers. Each one depicted the same man, Elvis Presley. His smile, a dazzling flash of light, seemed to banish the shadows that often clung to Lily's quiet corners. His eyes, dark and intense, held a promise of excitement, a world far removed from her small, predictable town of Willow Creek. Lily was, by her own admission and everyone else's observation, a shy girl, not just a little reserved, but truly deeply shy. Conversations often felt like navigating a minefield, each word a potential misstep. Her voice, soft and breathy, tended to get lost in a crowd, and her gaze, usually fixed on the floor or a faraway point, rarely met anyone's directly. But in her room, with Elvis's gaze fixed eternally on her from the glossy pages, she wasn't shy. Here she could sing along to his records at the top of her lungs, practice his dance moves in front of her full-length mirror, though she usually stumbled over her own feet, and dream dreams as big and bold as the sequins on his stage jackets. The biggest dream, the one that hummed beneath her skin like a forgotten melody, was to see him perform live. For months it had been a whispered hope, a fragile wish she hardly dared voice aloud. But then an announcement had blazed across the front page of the Willow Creek Gazette. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was coming to Memphis. It wasn't just a concert, it was the event, a pilgrimage. The news had hit Lily like a bolt of lightning, electrifying every nerve ending. Her parents, usually so practical and grounded, had seen the fierce, almost desperate longing in her eyes. After much discussion and a promise from Lily to help with extra chores for a month, they had finally agreed. They had even managed to snag 3 tickets, 2 for them, 1 for her, in the upper balcony seats 24, 25, and 26. Not front row, not even close, but in the same building, breathing the same air. It was enough to make Lily's heart pound like a drum solo. Now, with the concert just 2 days away, the excitement was almost unbearable. It felt like living inside a sparkling, vibrating hum. Every waking moment was consumed by thoughts of the show. What would he wear? What songs would he sing? But beneath the surface of pure joy, a new, more audacious idea had begun to blossom in Lily's mind. As delicate and fragile as the petals of a forgotten rose. She had seen it in fan magazines, read about it in breathless letters to the editor. Girls brave and bold, reaching out to touch his hand, throwing flowers onto the stage. The images were vivid, almost tangible. A cascade of roses, lilies, and daisies showering the stage, Elvis picking one up, acknowledging the fan. The idea lodged itself in Lily's thoughts and began to grow. What if she could do that? What if she could give him a flower? Not just throw it, but actually hand it to him. The thought alone sent a shiver of terror down her spine. Her stomach clenched into a tight knot. Lily, walk up to a stage packed with screaming fans, push past the security guards, and offer a flower to the most famous man in the world. It was impossible, utterly, ridiculously impossible. She picked up a worn copy of a magazine with Elvis on the cover, his eyes gazing out at her, a hint of a smirk on his lips. "You know what's crazy, right?" she whispered to his picture, her voice barely audible. "I can barely ask for a refill at the diner, let alone do something like that." Yet the idea wouldn't leave her alone. It pulsed. A quiet, insistent beat in her mind. It was about giving him a flower, about transcending the distance between her small, shy world and his vast, dazzling one, even for just a split second. What if he just saw her? What if he knew somehow that this small, quiet girl, usually invisible, had come all this way, filled with so much admiration and hope, a flower, something simple, beautiful, and silent. It wouldn't require words, which was good because Lily knew her voice would desert her the moment she got within 50 feet of the stage. But it would be a gesture, a tangible symbol of her quiet devotion. The problem, of course, was her shyness. It wasn't just a personality trait. It felt like a physical barrier, an invisible wall that sprang up between her and the world. How could she push past it even for Elvis? How could she summon the courage to step out of the shadows and into the blinding spotlight of that moment? She looked out her window at the fading sunlight, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The Willow Creek oak tree, ancient and sturdy, stood silhouetted against the vibrant canvas. Everything in her life was safe, predictable, and small. This was her chance, perhaps her only chance, to do something truly daring, to overcome, if only for a fleeting second, the very thing that defined her. The whispers of the dream grew louder, turning into a persistent hum. She imagined the scent of the flower, the feel of its petals, the impossible moment of handing it to him. Her heart thumped a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Could she do it? Could Lily, the girl who blushed just saying hello, brave the roaring crowd, the blinding lights, the very presence of Elvis Presley, and make her small, silent offering? The idea was terrifying. But it was also, she realized with a jolt that sent a tremor through her, deeply, profoundly appealing. It was a challenge she hadn't asked for, but one that now felt strangely vital. The concert was no longer just about seeing Elvis. It was about finding the courage within herself. The next morning, the idea of giving Elvis a flower felt less like a mad whim and more like an undeniable mission. Lily woke with a nervous flutter in her stomach, the kind that usually meant a difficult test at school or an unexpected guest. But this flutter was different. It was laced with a thrilling sense of purpose. She crept downstairs, past her parents still sleeping soundly, and went straight to the small, sun-drenched window seat in the living room. Her mother kept a collection of gardening books there, filled with vibrant photographs of blooms Lily had only ever seen in magazines. She opened one to a page displaying a cascade of roses, their petals unfurling in delicate layers. What kind of flower? It couldn't be just any flower. It had to be special, meaningful. Something that wouldn't wilt instantly under the stage lights. Something that would stand and, crucially, something that wouldn't be too extravagant, too showy. Lily didn't want to seem like she was trying too hard or drawing undue attention. She just wanted to offer a sincere, humble gift. A rose was classic, but perhaps too common. A daisy, a lily, her namesake, would be sweet, but they were fragile. She flipped through the pages, her finger tracing the contours of different blossoms. Snapdragons, petunias, gladiolus. None of them felt quite right. Then she saw it. On page 73, nestled between an iris and a marigold, was a single perfect camellia. Its petals, soft and velvety, were layered in an intricate pattern, usually a creamy white or a deep, rich red. Caption noted its symbolism: admiration, perfection, deep longing. It was a flower that spoke without words, elegant and understated, yet profoundly beautiful. And importantly, camellias were known for their resilience, their ability to hold their shape and freshness for a surprising amount of time. Once cut, camellia, Lily whispered to herself, the word tasting just right on her tongue. It was perfect. The next challenge, finding one. It was late spring, but camellias weren't common in Willow Creek. Her mother, Mrs. Agnes Miller, emerged from the kitchen, tying her apron. She was a practical woman, with a no-nonsense bun and kind, observant eyes that missed very little. Morning, sweet pea. Up early today. Mrs. Miller's intense focus on the book. Dreaming of Elvis already? Lily blushed, but didn't look away from the camellia. Mom, do you know where I could find a camellia? Mrs. Miller paused, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. At the concert, the words tumbled out in a rush, quiet and desperate. Her mother's eyes widened slightly. You want to walk up to the stage and give him a flower? Oh, Lily, that's quite something. Her voice was gentle, free of judgment. She knew how shy her daughter was. I know, Lily whispered, her voice barely there. It's silly. I probably won't even be able to get close, but I just thought if I could, just to give him something, a thank you, maybe." Mrs. Miller came over and sat beside her, putting an arm around Lily's shoulders. "It's not silly at all, sweet pea, it's very brave. And the camellia is a beautiful choice, very elegant," she thought for a moment, tapping her chin. "There's Mrs. Peterson, down on Elm Street. Her garden is a marvel, and I remember her bragging about a rare white camellia bush she managed to cultivate. She might have one blooming, making her heart feel lighter." "Really? Do you think she'd let me have one?" "Well, Mrs. Peterson is a kind woman. We can go ask, and if not, perhaps we can find something else just as lovely at the flower shop in the next town over on our way to Memphis tomorrow." Lily hugged her mother tightly. "Thank you, Mom, thank you." Later that afternoon, they drove to Mrs. Peterson's house. It was a quaint Victorian-style home, surrounded by a riot of blooms. Mrs. Peterson, a spry woman with bright bird-like eyes and a wide, friendly smile, greeted them at the door, her hands covered in gardening soil. When Mrs. Miller explained Lily's request, Mrs. Peterson's eyes sparkled. "For Elvis Presley, you say? Well, now isn't that just the sweetest thing? My daughter, Clara, she's mad for him. Goes on and on about his hips." She chuckled, then led them to the back of her sprawling garden, and there it was. A bush covered in the most exquisite white camellias Lily had ever seen. Each bloom was perfect, pristine, its petals unfolding in an intricate dance. They looked like porcelain, delicate yet strong. "They're stunning," Lily breathed, her voice filled with awe. "They are. They took me years to get this particular variety to thrive here," Mrs. Peterson said proudly. She carefully selected one that was fully open, its heart a gentle yellow, and cut it with a small pair of shears, leaving a good length of stem. She wrapped the stem in a damp paper towel and then in a piece of cellophane, as if it were a precious jewel. "Here you go, dear. May it bring you luck," she said, pressing it into Lily's hands. "And tell Elvis I said hello." Lily clutched the camellia, its cool, smooth petals brushing against her fingertips. It felt real, substantial. This was it, the first step. Her heart pounded, not just with nerves, but with a growing sense of anticipation. This little flower, so perfect and pure, was going to bridge the gap between her quiet world and the dazzling stage of Elvis Presley. The enormity of the gesture, the sheer audacity of it, was both terrifying and exhilarating. She looked at the flower, then back at her mother, who smiled warmly. The journey to Memphis and the incredible moment that awaited her suddenly felt much closer, much more real. The drive to Memphis felt both endlessly long and astonishingly short. Lily sat in the back seat of her father's Ford Fairlane, the precious camellia resting carefully in a vase of water nestled between her feet. She had wrapped its stem in a new damp cloth, just as Mrs. Peterson had shown her, and placed it in a small, sturdy box her mother had lined with soft tissue paper. The delicate petals wouldn't be crushed. The closer they got to the city, the more the air hummed with an almost tangible energy. Billboards advertising the concert flashed by Elvis's face beaming down at them. Cars filled with excited fans, some waving banners, others singing along to his songs playing on their radios, streamed past them on the highway. Lily watched them, a mixture of awe and trepidation swirling inside her. These people were so loud, so expressive, so unreserved in their adoration. She felt like a small, quiet island in a churning sea of enthusiasm. When they finally pulled into Memphis, the city seemed to explode with light and sound. The towering marquee of the Memphis Auditorium glowed against the dusk sky, a beacon of dazzling promise. Even from blocks away, Lily could hear the faint murmur of the crowd, a low rumble that grew steadily louder as her father navigated through the bustling streets. Parking was a nightmare, and by the time they found a spot, her parents were already looking a bit flustered, but Lily barely noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the grand entrance of the auditorium, where streams of people were flowing inside like a mighty river. Girls in their best dresses and boys with slicked back hair, their faces alight with anticipation. "Ready, Lilybug?" Her father, Mr. Robert Miller, asked, his voice a little strained from the traffic. He was a steady, dependable man, not given to histrionics, and the sheer volume of excitement around him seemed to amuse and bewilder him in equal measure. Lily took a deep breath. "Ready?" she managed, her voice a little squeaky. She carefully picked up her flower box. The camellia, still pristine, seemed to glow in the fading light. Stepping out of the car, the full force of the atmosphere hit her. The air crackled with anticipation. The scent of popcorn mixed with the sweet cloying smell of perfume. The babble of excited voices was a symphony of sound, punctuated by shrieks of laughter and bursts of music. From portable radios, Lily felt her shyness try to swallow her whole. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird, desperate to escape. She clutched the flower box tighter, her knuckles turning white. "Just stick close to us, dear," her mother said, noticing her daughter's sudden paleness. She took Lily's free hand, her grip reassuring. Navigating the throng of people towards the entrance was like being caught in a human tide. Lily felt dwarfed, invisible, yet at the same time acutely aware of her own smallness. She saw other girls carrying flowers, bouquets of roses and carnations, but none as perfectly white and distinct as her camellia. A flicker of pride mixed with her terror. Inside the auditorium, the noise amplified, echoing off the high ceilings. The vast space was already filling up a sea of bobbing heads and eager faces. Ushers dressed smartly pointed people towards their section. Their seats were in the upper balcony, a long climb up several flights of stairs. As they ascended, the stage below grew smaller and smaller, a distant, glowing rectangle. Lily's stomach dropped from this height. Elvis would be a tiny figure. How could she possibly get his attention, let alone hand him a flower? The idea, which had felt so vivid and achievable just hours ago, now seemed utterly absurd. Her courage, which had bravely presented itself that morning, was rapidly shrinking into a terrified whisper. "Are you all right, sweet pea?" her mother asked, seeing the despair clouding Lily's features. "It's so far," Lily whispered, her gaze fixed on the distant stage. "I don't think I can do it." Her father, usually quiet, put a hand on her shoulder. Now, Lilybug, don't give up before you even try. Just enjoy the show. If the opportunity presents itself, it presents itself. If not, you're still seeing your hero, aren't you?" His words were kind, practical, and true, but they didn't quell the ache of disappointment already forming in her chest. The dream had been so clear, so tantalizing. Now faced with the sheer scale of the event, the unbridgeable distance, it felt impossible. They finally reached their seats. They were indeed high up, overlooking the vast expanse of the crowd and the stage below. Lily carefully placed the flower box on her lap, holding it protectively. She watched as more and more people poured in, the roar of anticipation building to a crescendo. The lights in the auditorium dimmed, plunging the vast space into a hush, punctuated by a collective gasp. A single spotlight illuminated the stage, and then a figure appeared from the wing. Not Elvis yet, just a shadowy technician testing a microphone. The crowd stirred, a wave of excitement rippling through them. Lily's breath hitched in her throat. This was it. The moment was almost upon them. But the crushing weight of her shyness, combined with the immense distance to the stage, felt overwhelming. She looked down at the pristine white camellia, so perfect, so hopeful, and felt a wave of sadness. How could she, a quiet girl tucked away in the back row, ever hope to bridge this gap? The flowers suddenly felt heavy in her hands, not a symbol of bravery, but a stark reminder of her limitations. Her dream felt like it was slipping away, lost in the overwhelming roar of the crowd. The air in the Memphis auditorium crackled like a live wire. The house lights had dimmed completely, plunging the vast space into a breathless darkness, save for the single spotlight dancing on the empty stage. The murmur of the crowd had transformed into a collective, expectant hum, vibrating through the very floor. Lily gripped the flower box, her palms sweating. Her heart felt like a wild drum, echoing the thrum of 1,000 other hearts around her. Then the first notes of music hit a powerful, pulsating rhythm that shook the entire auditorium. A wave of sound, a roar that was almost physical, erupted from the crowd. It was deafening, exhilarating, terrifying. And then, there he was. Elvis Presley. He exploded onto the stage, bathed in a brilliant floodlight, a vision of glittering gold, lame and undeniable charisma. The roar amplified a sound that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the air. Girls screamed, boys whistled, and grown men cheered with unbridled enthusiasm. He wasn't just a figure on a magazine cover. He was alive, electric, moving with an effortless grace that defied gravity. Lily for a moment forgot to breathe. He was more magnificent, more vibrant than any picture could convey. He moved his hips, swaying, his smile flashing, and the entire audience seemed to lean forward, captivated, mesmerized. His voice, when he began to sing, was a deep, resonant rumble, then a soaring, powerful cry that filled every corner of the enormous hall. "Heartbreak Hotel," he sang, and the crowd sang along, lost in the moment. Lily watched, mesmerized, the flower box forgotten for a precious minute. Then, as he moved closer to the edge of the stage, interacting with the fans in the front rows, the idea resurfaced, a persistent spark in the vast darkness of her fear. Girls were reaching for him, throwing small gifts. It was almost impossible to see from her high perch, but she could sense the energy, the desperate longing to connect. Her gaze drifted down to the immaculate white camellia, nestled in its box. It seemed to whisper to her a quiet challenge. "Are you going to let fear win?" Her parents were engrossed in the performance, swaying slightly, smiling. Her mother caught her eye and gave her a reassuring nod, as if sensing the silent battle raging within. Lily taking a shaky breath. Lily made a decision. It was a crazy decision, a terrifying one, but it felt right. She couldn't just sit here. She had to try, even if she failed, even if she just got a few steps closer before being turned back. She had to try. "Mom, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "I'm going to try." Her mother's eyes widened, but her father just nodded slowly, a look of quiet support on his face. "Be careful, Lilybug. Don't push too hard." Lily stood up, clutching the flower box. Her legs felt like jelly, but a strange surge of adrenaline propelled her forward. "I'll be right back," she said, her voice shaking. She began to descend the stairs, one tentative step after another, pushing against the flow of people moving towards their seats. It was a slow, agonizing process. With each step down, the stage grew larger, Elvis's figure more defined, and the crowd in the lower sections seemed denser, a formidable barrier. She reached the main floor, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The noise was overwhelming down here, a physical force that vibrated through her bones. Security guards, large and imposing, stood at intervals, their stern faces discouraging any attempts to approach the stage. Lily's courage wavered, threatening to desert her completely. Her hand trembled so violently she almost dropped the box. "No, you came this far." She saw a small gap in the crowd, near the aisle that led towards the front. It was a narrow opening, but it was something. She took another deep breath, her mind fixed on the pristine white camellia, a tiny beacon of hope. She slipped into the stream of people, trying to look inconspicuous like she belonged there. She kept her eyes fixed on the stage, on Elvis, who was now singing a slower, more soulful ballad, his voice rich and full of emotion. He was moving towards the edge of the stage, his eyes sweeping across the crowd, connecting with individuals, making each person feel seen. This was her chance. Or it wasn't, but she had to try. Lily pushed through the last few rows of standing fans, muttering apologies as she squeezed past. Her shyness, for once, was overpowered by a single burning desire. She was close now, agonizingly close. She could see the sheen of sweat on Elvis's brow, the intricate stitching on his jacket. He was so real, so magnificent. A security guard, a burly man with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward, blocking her path just as she was about to reach the low barrier that separated the stage from the audience. "Back, little lady," he said, his voice firm, though not unkind. "No getting up here." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her mind went blank. This was it. Failure. The wall had gone up. She just stood there, frozen, unable to speak, clutching the flower box like a lifeline. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and sudden. Just then, Elvis finished a particularly powerful note, and the crowd roared again. Paused, catching his breath, and his gaze almost casually swept over the area where Lily stood, pinned by the guard. For a split second, his eyes met hers. They weren't distant and powerful like on the magazine covers. They were warm, curious, and for a fleeting instant seemed to understand. He saw her, a small, trembling girl clutching a white box. He must have seen the despair on her face, the quiet desperation in her eyes, or perhaps he simply saw the unusual flower box. Whatever it was, he did something extraordinary. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the security guard, a silent command. The guard, surprised, hesitated for a moment, then stepped back just a single crucial step. It wasn't an invitation to the stage, but it was an opening. Lily's heart leaped. This was it, now or never. She took a shaky step forward, raising the box, her hand trembling violently. She couldn't speak, couldn't even find her voice to whisper his name. All she could do was extend her arm, offering the silent, perfect bloom. Elvis, seeing her outstretched hand, walked towards the very edge of the stage. He leaned down, his eyes still on hers, a faint, kind smile touching his lips. He reached out his long, elegant fingers, brushing hers as he gently took the camellia from the box. Contact was fleeting, barely there, but it sent a jolt of electricity through Lily's entire body. Her world tilted on its axis. He had taken it. He had actually taken her flower. The moment Elvis Presley's fingers brushed hers as he took the camellia, a wave of shock, relief, and pure, unadulterated disbelief washed over Lily. It was as if time itself had slowed, stretching that single second into an eternity. His eyes, so famous, so captivating, had met hers, not with a celebrity's practiced glance, but with a flicker of genuine connection, a silent acknowledgement. And then he had the flower, her flower. The roar of the crowd, which had momentarily faded into a distant hum in her dazed mind, swelled again. Elvis straightened up the white camellia, a stark, beautiful contrast against the rich gold of his laden jacket. He didn't just hold it for a second or give it a cursory glance. He looked at it genuinely. His thumb gently traced the velvety edge of a petal lily still frozen in place, watched with bated breath. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. She had done it. She had actually done it. The overwhelming shyness, the fear of failure, the daunting obstacles, all of it had somehow been pushed aside by an almost primal need to make this connection. Then Elvis did something that sent a fresh wave of shock through her. He turned slightly, looking at the camellia again. His lips curved into a slow, warm smile. It wasn't the flashy, stage-ready grin he offered the cameras, but something softer, more personal. He brought the flower closer to his jacket. He reached into his inner pocket and, to Lily's astonishment, pulled out a small, gleaming gold pin. It looked like a simple lapel pin, elegant and understated. With a surprising gentleness, he positioned the camellia over his left breast, right over his heart. He carefully, deliberately pushed the pin through the stem of the flower, and then through the fabric of his jacket, securing it in place. He looked up then, his gaze sweeping over the audience, but his eyes seemed to pause just for an instant on Lily. His smile widened a silent thank you, a subtle acknowledgement that was meant just for her. The action was so simple, so quiet, yet its impact on Lily was seismic. He wasn't just holding it, he wasn't just setting it aside, he was wearing it on his jacket. For the whole concert, the thought resonated through her like a chord struck on a grand piano. The crowd, caught up in the renewed energy of the concert, might not have even noticed the quiet exchange, or if they did, they probably assumed it was just another fan interaction. But Lily knew. She knew the significance. It was a choice. Public yet deeply personal acceptance of her small, silent gift. Tears hot and unstoppable spilled down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. A mix of relief, joy, and a profound sense of validation. For a girl who often felt invisible, who struggled to make her voice heard, this was an extraordinary moment. She had been seen. Quiet offering had been received, cherished, and proudly displayed. The security guard, who had taken a step back, now gestured for her to return to her seat, his expression softer than before. Lily nodded, unable to speak, and slowly, carefully made her way back through the crowd. Her legs still felt weak, but they moved with a new lightness, as if she were walking on air. When she finally reached her parents in the upper balcony, they were both looking at her, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. "Lily, are you all right? What happened? Did he—" her mother began, her voice hushed. Lily couldn't speak. She just pointed, a trembling finger aimed at the distant figure on the stage. "Look," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Look!" Her parents squinted, their eyes searching the dazzling figure of Elvis. He was in full swing now, hips gyrating, guitar strumming. But there, clearly visible even from this distance, was the stark white bloom pinned to his gold lame jacket. Her mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my goodness, Robert, he's wearing it. He's really wearing it." Her father let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be Lily, bud. You did it. He's got your flower." His face, usually so composed, was alight with astonishment and pride. Lily sank back into her seat, utterly drained but vibrating, with a quiet internal electricity. The camellia, her camellia, was still there. Through the rest of the song, she couldn't take her eyes off it. It was a tiny white beacon on a shimmering gold landscape. Every time Elvis moved, every time the light caught him, the flower seemed to shimmer, a silent testament to an impossible moment. The shyness that had gripped her for so long had not vanished, but it had been momentarily eclipsed by something far more powerful. Tiny seed of courage, planted by a dream and nurtured by a single, perfect bloom, had just blossomed into something real and undeniable. She had approached the king, a quiet girl with a silent gift, and he had not only accepted it but worn it, making her feel for the first time in a very long time truly seen. The concert hadn't even truly begun for her. Not really. It was only just starting, but it had already become the most unforgettable night of her life. As the concert roared on, Lily found herself in a strange, dreamlike state. Her body was in seat 26 of the upper balcony, but her mind was floating, orbiting the dazzling electric figure on stage. Every song Elvis sang, every move he made was now filtered through the shimmering presence of her white camellia, pinned proudly to his chest. Hound dog blasted through the arena, and Elvis was a whirlwind of energy. His voice powerful, his legs a blur. The crowd was a pulsing, screaming entity, completely lost in the rhythm. Lily watched. Not just Elvis, but the flower. It stayed exactly where he had placed it, a small, pristine flag of white against the shimmering gold. It swayed gently with his movements, a silent participant in the spectacle. It was mesmerizing. Other fans were throwing scarves, teddy bears, even articles of clothing onto the stage. Stagehands would discreetly clear them away, or Elvis might pick up a scarf, wipe his brow, and then toss it into the crowd, igniting a fresh wave of screams. But the camellia remained. It was different. It was pinned. Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she hadn't quite experienced before. It wasn't just excitement. It was a deep, quiet sense of belonging. In that moment, through that simple flower, she was connected to him. It was a secret, shared understanding between them, even if no one else in the roaring crowd knew its significance. Her mother, seeing Lily's rapt gaze, leaned over. "Can you believe it? He's really keeping it on." Lily just nodded, unable to articulate the depth of her feelings. It was more than just keeping it on. It was an affirmation. It was as if Elvis, the biggest star in the world, had looked at her, a shy, quiet girl from Willow Creek, and said, "I see you and I accept your gift." Every time the spotlight hit him, it seemed to catch the white petals of the camellia, making them glow. It became a focal point for Lily, a personal beacon in the dazzling chaos. She found herself watching it, checking it almost as if she expected it to disappear, but it never did. It was a constant, beautiful reminder of her moment of impossible courage. He transitioned from rock anthems to soulful ballads, his voice shifting effortlessly from raw power to tender crooning. During a slower song, "Love Me Tender," Elvis moved to the very front of the stage, his gaze sweeping across the rows of eager faces. He sang with such emotion, his eyes seeming to bore into the very hearts of his audience. Lily held her breath. He was looking in her direction. Or was it just her imagination, her hopeful heart, seeing what it wanted to see? But then, as his eyes drifted past her section, he paused, just for a fraction of a second. His gaze wasn't fixed, but it lingered a subtle acknowledgement. And then, almost imperceptibly, his free hand, the one not holding the microphone, went to the camellia, his fingers gently touching its petals, as if to make sure it was still there. It was so subtle, so brief, that no one else around her seemed to notice. But Lily did. It was another silent message, another shared moment. He remembered. He knew it was her flower, and he appreciated it. A fresh wave of warmth flooded Lily. The shyness, which was never far away, was still there, a soft hum beneath her skin, but it was no longer consuming. It was like a veil had been lifted, allowing a tiny, fragile light to shine through. She felt herself straighten in her seat, a faint smile touching her lips. For the rest of the concert, the camellia became her anchor. It was a silent testament to the magic of the night, a personal connection in a vast, overwhelming crowd. She watched him sing, dance, and charm the audience, but her eyes always returned to the small white flower. It felt like a shared secret, a thread connecting her quiet heart to the beating heart of the king himself. She found herself singing along, her voice usually so tentative, gaining a surprising strength. She even tapped her foot to the rhythm, a small, uncharacteristic movement for someone who usually sat perfectly still. The music felt different now, more personal, more profound. It wasn't just a performance. It was an experience she was now intimately a part of. As the concert neared its halfway point, and Elvis went backstage for a brief interlude, Lily looked at her parents. Her mother's face was still alight with wonder. Her father, usually reserved, was tapping his foot along to the music, playing softly over the speakers. "He's truly something, isn't he?" her father said, shaking his head in admiration. "And to think he's wearing your flower." Lily just smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. The initial terror of the interaction had been replaced by a quiet, unwavering joy. The camellia wasn't just a flower anymore. It was a symbol of courage, of connection, and of the incredible power of a single moment. It was a reminder that even the shyest of hearts could reach out and touch the extraordinary. The brief intermission felt like a lifetime. Lily found herself replaying the moment over and over in her mind. The walk down, the security guard, Elvis's eyes, the brush of his fingers, and finally, the deliberate pin. Each detail was etched vividly into her memory, a precious, sparkling gem. When Elvis reappeared on stage, bathed in a new array of dazzling lights, the roar of the crowd was even more thunderous than before. And there it was, the camellia still pristine, still proudly pinned to his jacket. It wasn't wilted or drooping. It looked as precious and perfect as when Mrs. Peterson had cut it from her bush. Testament, Lily thought, to the camellia's resilience, and perhaps to a certain king's careful handling. He launched into a series of high-energy numbers, his movements more dynamic, his voice even more electrifying. The gold-lane jacket shimmered, reflecting the lights, making him seem almost ethereal. The white flower remained a fixed point of gentle elegance amidst the dazzling chaos. As he sang Jailhouse Rock, his famous, swiveling hips and powerful leg movements captivated the entire audience. Lily watched, mesmerized, but also with a new sense of awareness. She wasn't just a distant observer anymore. She felt a connection, a quiet thread weaving through the thousands of screaming fans, connecting her to him. At one point, during an instrumental break, Elvis stepped back from the microphone, taking a moment to breathe, a subtle smile playing on his lips as he surveyed the adoring crowd. His gaze drifted across the upper balcony, not lingering but sweeping, a general acknowledgement, and then his eyes seemed to find her section. But Lily felt it, that distinct, almost imperceptible pause. His head tilted just a fraction of an inch. His lips seemed to form a silent, almost invisible, "Thank you," and his hand once again gently touched the camellia on his chest. It was so subtle, so fleeting, that only someone looking directly at him, with the specific knowledge that Lily possessed, and it was enough. It was more than enough. It was a quiet affirmation. He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't just pinned it on and moved on. He was aware, and it was still there. Tremor went through Lily, not of fear but of profound gratitude. In a world where she often felt invisible, Elvis Presley, the king, had seen her. He had acknowledged her. He had validated her silent courage. The experience was beginning to subtly transform. Constant gnawing fear of judgment, the crushing weight of her shyness began to lighten, just slightly. It was like a thick fog starting to dissipate, allowing faint rays of sunshine to break through. She still wouldn't suddenly start dancing in the aisles, or shouting out song requests, but something inside her had shifted. She looked around at the other fans, their faces flushed with excitement, their hands clapping, their voices hoarse from screaming. For the first time, she felt less like an outsider and more like a participant. She was part of this collective energy, this shared experience of adoration, but she also had her own unique, precious secret within it. During another slow song, as the lights softened and Elvis's voice became a tender caress, Lily found herself closing her eyes for a moment, simply listening. The music filled her, seeped into her very soul, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly present. Not lost in her anxieties, not consumed by fear, but simply there, fully immersed in the beauty and wonder of the moment. When she opened her eyes, she looked at the camellia. It was still perfect. A small white star on the shimmering gold. It represented her bravery, yes, but it also represented something else, a glimmer of her own self, starting to shine through. The girl who usually hid in the shadows had stepped forward, however briefly, and had been met with kindness and recognition. The idea that she, Lily Miller, could make such a grand gesture, could have such a profound and personal impact on someone as monumental as Elvis Presley, was both humbling and incredibly empowering. It was as if a tiny locked door within her had been nudged open, allowing a sliver of light to enter. Parents, still enthralled by the performance, were humming along to the melody. Her mother turned to her. On her face, "You look happy, Lily, Bug," she whispered. Lily. Concert was far from over, but its most profound impact on Lily had already occurred. It wasn't just a concert anymore. It was a watershed moment, a silent turning point in her quiet life. The camellia, her silent messenger, had done its work. As the concert flowed into its final third, the energy in the Memphis auditorium seemed to intensify. Elvis, tireless and electrifying, moved from one hit to the next, never losing a beat. The camellia, a steadfast white beacon, remained on his jacket, defying sweat, movement, and the sheer force of his performance. Lily, however, started to notice something subtle happening around her. While many fans were too engrossed in Elvis's performance to pay attention to anything else, a few keen-eyed individuals seemed to have noticed the unusual floral adornment on his jacket. During a particularly energetic number, Elvis spun around his jacket, flaring out for a second. Camellia caught the stage light, sparkling like a jewel. A girl a few rows down from Lily, wearing a bright red dress and a beehive hairdo, nudged her friend. Lily saw her point, then whisper something, her eyes wide with curiosity. Her friend leaned in, squinting, then nodded slowly, a look of surprise on her face. It happened again a few minutes later. A couple in front of them, looking up at the stage through opera glasses, suddenly lowered them. Exchanging a puzzled glance, the woman gestured towards Elvis's chest, a silent question on her lips. Her partner shrugged, then looked back at the stage. A slight frown of curiosity still on his face. Lily felt a strange mix of emotions. A flicker of pride, knowing that her flower was causing this quiet stir, and then the familiar clutch of shyness. What if someone asked her about it? What if they realized she was the one who gave it to him? The thought sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She hugged herself, trying to seem small, inconspicuous. The camellia was too striking, too unusual to go completely unnoticed. It wasn't a thrown scarf, an easily discarded token. It was pinned, intentionally placed. As Elvis slowed the pace for another ballad, he moved closer to the edge of the stage, interacting with the fans in the lower rows, shaking hands, accepting small notes. It was during one of these moments, when the spotlight was intensely focused on him, that a group of girls in the front row started whispering. Animatedly, amongst them Stove, pointing at the flower lily, watching from above. Felt her heart thump. They were really seeing it now. One particularly bold girl, her blonde hair bouncing with excitement, yelled out, "Elvis, what's with the flower?" The microphone was a little too far for Elvis to hear clearly over the general din, or perhaps he chose to ignore it. He simply smiled, strummed his guitar, and continued to sing. But Lily saw his hand casually, almost instinctually, touch the camellia again. It was a subtle gesture, but to Lily it spoke volumes. It was a protective touch, a private moment in the public eye. Lily felt a quiet thrill ripple through her. He was acknowledging it. Even if silently, it felt like a shared secret, growing in plain sight. It was no longer just her moment. It was becoming their moment. A quiet understanding between the shy fan and the dazzling king. Her mother nudged her gently. "They're noticing," she whispered, a smile playing on her lips. "Your flower is quite the sensation, Lilybug." Lily managed a small, nervous smile in return. She could feel a few glances from people around them, curious looks aimed in their direction. Had they seen her go down? Had they made the connection? A woman sitting next to her mother, a friendly-looking lady with bright, intelligent eyes, leaned over. "Excuse me, dear," she said, her voice warm. "Oh, it's a lovely camellia, isn't it?" she said smoothly. "My daughter, Lily, loves flowers. We were admiring it from up here." The woman nodded, still curious. "Indeed. It's a very striking contrast to his suit. He must really like it to keep it on for so long. Most things he just tosses into the crowd." Lily felt a fresh wave of quiet pride. Yes, he did like it. He liked her flower. The woman's observation, though innocent, confirmed the special nature of the moment. It wasn't just another tossed-away item. This was different. The conversation ended there, thankfully. And Lily sank back into her seat, relieved but also strangely buoyed. Her fear of being noticed was still there, but it was being slowly chipped away by a burgeoning sense of quiet confidence. She had made her mark, a beautiful silent mark, and it was being noticed, even appreciated by others. The music swelled again, Elvis's voice filling the arena, and Lily looked at him, at the bright white bloom on his chest. It was a testament to her courage, to his kindness, and to the extraordinary power of a single simple gesture. It was no longer just a concert. It was a deeply personal, quietly shared experience that was slowly, subtly, changing the very fabric of who Lily was. The concert was drawing to a close, and the air in the Memphis auditorium was thick with emotion. Elvis was performing his final songs, a medley of his biggest hits, and the crowd was a roaring, swaying sea of adoration, desperately clinging to every last moment. The energy was electric, a powerful current of shared joy and reluctant farewell. Through it all, the white camellia remained. It was still pinned to Elvis's golden jacket, perhaps a little less pristine after hours of energetic performance, but undeniably there. It had endured every hip swivel, every passionate vocal, every flash of the stage lights. It was a silent witness to the entire unforgettable show. Her quiet, brave gesture, born of a whisper of a dream, had found its place in this colossal spectacle. It wasn't just a flower anymore, it was a testament, a symbol of a connection made, a moment cherished. Elvis moved through his final numbers with a heightened intensity, as if he too felt the approaching end of the magic. He sang "Can't Help Falling in Love," his voice tender and heartfelt, and the crowd swayed, many holding lighters aloft, creating a galaxy of tiny stars in the darkened arena. It was a beautiful, emotional moment, and Lily found her own eyes misting over. During this song, Elvis once again looked out into the crowd. His gaze was softer now, filled with warmth and gratitude. And as his eyes swept across the upper balcony for a fleeting instant, they seemed to lock with Lily's. This time there was no doubt. It wasn't just a general glance. It was direct, personal. His lips curved into a gentle, knowing smile, and he lifted his hand, not to wave or gesture to the crowd, but to lightly touch the camellia on his chest. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, a shared secret between them, a silent acknowledgement of her gift and his appreciation for it. Lily's heart swelled with an overwhelming mix of emotions. It was a silent thank you, a final intimate farewell. In a hall filled with thousands, he remembered. He cherished it. He was, in his own way, saying goodbye directly to her, confirming that their brief, impossible connection was real and had resonated with him too. The song ended, and the roar of applause was deafening. A cascade of gratitude and reluctant parting. Elvis took a deep bow, then another, his chest heaving, a sheen of sweat on his brow. He looked genuinely moved, truly touched by the devotion of his fans. Thank you very much," he finally said, his voice raspy but full of warmth, as the music faded into a triumphant crescendo. "You've been a beautiful audience. Good night, Memphis." Crowd erupted in a final thunderous ovation, begging for an encore. Chants of "Elvis, Elvis" filled the air, a desperate plea for more. Lily found herself joining in, her voice, usually so timid, rising in unison with the thousands around her. She didn't care if she was heard. It was a release, a primal expression of her awe and gratitude. Elvis lingered for a few more moments, waving, blowing kisses, his eyes sparkling. And then, with one last dazzling smile, he turned and walked off the stage, disappearing into the shadows of the wings. The lights on stage dimmed, and the house lights slowly began to rise, bringing the vast auditorium back into stark reality. The crowd slowly began to disperse, a low hum of chatter replacing the thunderous applause. People were still buzzing with excitement, replaying moments from the show, talking about his voice. Lily sat there for a moment completely still, her parents waiting patiently beside her. She felt drained, yet utterly full. The quiet girl who had arrived here, terrified and uncertain, was leaving, changed. Camellia, though now gone from her sight, imprinted on her memory, had been a powerful catalyst. "Well," her father said, stretching, "that was quite a show. He really is something, isn't he?" Her mother put an arm around Lily's shoulder. "And he kept your flower on Sweet Pea for the whole concert. That's truly special." Lily finally moved, letting out a long, slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It was amazing," she whispered, her voice still a little hoarse from cheering. He saw me, Mom. He really did." Her mother squeezed her shoulder. "I know, Sweet Pea. I saw it too." As they slowly made their way out of the auditorium, Lily looked back at the stage one last time. It was empty now, the magic already beginning to fade, leaving only the lingering scent of perfume and the faint echo of rock and roll. But in her mind's eye, she could still see him bathed in light, a small, perfect white camellia glowing against his golden jacket, a silent monument to a moment that had felt like a dream, but was wonderfully, undeniably real. The unforgettable farewell was not just the end of a concert. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Lily. The drive back to Willow Creek was quieter than the journey to Memphis. Parents, exhausted but content, hummed softly to themselves. Lily sat in the back, gazing out the window, watching the stars appear in the dark velvet sky. The bright lights of Memphis slowly receded, replaced by the familiar silhouettes of trees and fields. But the magic of the concert, the warmth of that impossible connection, hummed within her a vibrant living thing. She didn't feel tired. She felt exhilarated, as if every cell in her body was buzzing with a quiet, joyful energy. The shyness hadn't vanished completely, of course. She knew she wouldn't suddenly become the loudest girl in her class or start leading school assemblies, but something profound had shifted within her. It was as if a heavy cloak, one she hadn't even realized she was wearing, had been subtly lifted. The memory of Elvis, his kind eyes, the gentle touch as he took the camellia, and the deliberate act of pinning it to his jacket played on an endless loop in her mind. And then those last shared glances, the silent affirmation that he remembered, that he appreciated. It was a secret she would carry with her, a personal treasure that no one could ever take away. She closed her eyes and pictured the camellia, its perfect, pristine petals, the way it had glowed against the gold lame. It was a symbol of her quiet courage, of her willingness to step beyond her comfort zone even for just a moment. It was a symbol of being seen, truly seen by someone she admired beyond measure. When they arrived back home, the house felt small and quiet after the grandeur of the auditorium. Lily slipped into her bedroom, the same sanctuary where she had first whispered her impossible dream. She looked at the Elvis pictures on her wall. Now they seemed to gaze back at her with a new understanding. They were no longer just distant idols. They were connected to a real, lived experience. She didn't try to sing or dance. Instead, she sat on her bed, a deep sense of peace settling over her. She took out her sketch pad and her charcoal pencils. She wasn't an artist, not really, but sometimes when words failed, her drawing helped her to express what she felt. She began to sketch, not a full portrait of Elvis, but something simpler. She drew a single perfect camellia. Its petals, layered and intricate, took shape under her careful hand. Then she drew a faint outline of a jacket and the flower pinned precisely over the left side, over the heart. It was a simple drawing, but for Lily it was imbued with the entire weight of the night. As she drew, memories of the concert flooded back. The roar of the crowd, the blinding lights, the raw power of his voice. But more than that, she remembered the quiet moments, the brush of his fingers, his kind smile, the silent acknowledgement from the stage. These were the moments that would truly last. The drawing finished, she looked at it, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was a tangible reminder of the impossible made real. The next morning, Lily woke with a sense of lightness. The world still had its challenges, and her shyness was still a part of her, a familiar companion. But it no longer felt like an impenetrable wall. It felt more like a gentle curtain, one she now knew she could part if she really wanted to. At breakfast, she found herself talking more than usual, recounting details of the concert to her parents. Her voice clearer, less hesitant. She described the energy of the crowd, the way Elvis moved, the feeling of the music. And then she spoke about the flower, not with embarrassment, but with a quiet pride. "He really wore it all night," she said, her eyes shining. "And he looked at me, Mom, right at me." Her mother smiled warmly. "I'm so glad we went, sweet pea. It sounds like it was everything you dreamed of, and more." It was more. It was so much more. It wasn't just a concert, it was a turning point. In the days and weeks that followed, Lily found small ways to apply the lesson of the camellia. When a teacher asked a question in class, and she knew the answer, she found the courage to raise her hand, her voice a little steadier than before. When a girl from school invited her to a movie, she didn't immediately make an excuse. She thought about it, and then, to her own surprise, she said. Yes. She still treasured her Elvis magazine, still played his records, but now when she looked at his pictures, she remembered the real man, the kind eyes, the gentle hand, and she remembered the feeling of her own courage blooming in the face of fear. The white camellia, so fleeting and delicate, had become a permanent part of her story. It was a reminder that the biggest dreams aren't always loud and flashy. Sometimes they are quiet whispers, brought to life by a single brave step, and recognized by a flicker of kindness. Lily had given a flower to the king, and in return he had given her something priceless, a glimpse of her own strength, a seed of confidence that would continue to grow quietly, beautifully, just like the perfect bloom that started it all.